hope all is well. So today we're going to be looking at my live preset that I use with the band Drogher. We play modern metal, we're tuned in drop B, it's a lot of fun. You can check out our music in the description box below. I've done a playthrough as well of one of our songs, or at least a short part of the song as well on the channel, so you can check that out here as well. And we're going to be looking at the preset today in, I guess, two parts. So the first part will be a build of said preset, because there's quite a few tricks going on. And then after I've shown a few of the tricks that I've been using on this preset, we'll go into the actual preset I use. The only caveat is that we won't be using my custom IR that I use, which is a combination of Otto audio cabs, but we'll be using a combination of factory cabs, so you can use the same preset yourself. So to start off with, here's the actual, I guess, finished preset, or at least the final form, before we start looking at a few tricks and how we put things together. As we can see, there's a lot of blocks and a lot of stuff going on, but the core tone is actually just a boost, the amp, there's gate, there's a cab, the multiband compressor, and the final parametric EQ I'm actually using as to shape the final tone going to front of house. So this is where we'll find our usual low cut, high cut, and things like that. So now we'll put the preset together, or at least part of it, so I can explain some of the tricks that are going on. So as you can see, we're using two rows here, because we have so many blocks that we'll be using later on. So the way to do that is we'll use an input block at the start, and we'll put our output block on the row just below that. You can use the row above if you like. And then we'll connect these two with a send and return block. So you take send one and return one, make sure you're using the same one, and we'll place that here, and then you connect these up as you would normally. So input to the send, and then from the return to the out. So now we have a few extra spaces that we can use and put blocks in. Now we're going to add our amp. I'll add our cab here actually. I'll add a filter block at the start, which will be our clean boost in this case. And then I'll add our multiband compressor after the cab, and then at the very end, parametric EQ, which will be shaping the tone. And as we're playing high gain, I'll add a gate. In this case, I'll add it after the amp. And then that's our basic core tone setup. And I'll first go over a few of the tricks I'm using to get the tone out of the amp that I kind of like, and then we'll take it from there. So first things first, we're going to actually turn off the gate in the input block. We'll do that by just taking the threshold down. I do this because I like having the control on the actual gate itself. So then I can just turn off this gate and I don't have to worry about there being a gate right at the start. I do this for the lead scenes that we use because I like having that extra, I guess, control, and for sustained notes there won't be a gate like cutting off your sustained long bends and things like that you might be using. So I'll be going over most of the other blocks today, but the detail on, say, the gate, multiband compressor, I've actually covered in another of my videos, which is the modern metal preset tutorial, which I'll link up here. But today we're going to be looking at the other blocks and how I set up the preset for my band and how we play live. So first thing to address is, because we're using a send and return block, something that you have to do as soon as you set this up is up the return level to 100% on the return block, because when you hook this up, there's no guitar signal going through, and that's because of this level that defaults at 0%. So you put this at 100%, and now we have signal as we should. So for the cab we're using today, I was trying to find something that was kind of close to the custom IR blend that I use, which is a set of Otto audio cabs. I'll link exactly which ones I'm using below in the description box. And I tried my best. I spent many hours, and there's a lot of fun combinations that you can do. And I actually had good results with some weirder combinations. By weirder I mean like say a 4-inch speaker with a 57 on there with something else, or even like a 2x12 from say a deluxe reverb, which is like a clean amp and something else. But I decided in this case to go for a sort of tried and tested sort of V30, and I'm using two factory cabs. So it's the diesel rear-loaded V30 with a 57 on it. It's made by Hammer. It's a factory cab. And then another Hammer factory cab, which is an Engel V30 with a 57 on that. I felt it gave like, it's a good tone. It's not really what I use with the band, but because of, you know, I can't share like custom IRs that I've bought, I thought this was like the best compromise. So onto the amp settings. In one of my other videos, I showed that the main difference between the Fryette model that's in here and the actual amp, which I own, is down to the input trim. And if you set it around 2, you get a much closer response to the actual amp. There's a few other EQ tricks to use as well to help, but in essence, the main thing was actually the input gain, which you can set using the input trim. And now this is where things get interesting, at least for this preset. So what I'm doing is I'm using a clean boost at the start, and the thing I'm doing here is that I'm shaving off some low end and some high end, so 80 Hertz as a low cut and 10K on the high cut, and I'm using a boost of 8 dB. Set this to taste. And the reason why I really like this amp is the response. So how it responds to pick attack and how quick it is, and how we can really tighten up and get this really aggressive but super tight tone out of it. Obviously now, you know, the default settings and how everything else is set up is kind of flubby, but we can really tighten this up. So we've got clean boost going out front, and then for the actual amp settings itself, there's too much bass, so we'll pull that down to 3. There's probably too much depth as well, which is adding to that, so we'll pull that down to 3 as well. We'll pull the gain back a bit as well, since we're using a boost, that tends to help. We can actually crank the overdrive, because the way the actual amp is set up is that you've got 2 gain knobs. So the first gain knob is for the voicing, and then the second one is more for overdrive and saturation, and it sort of replicates that in here as well. And we're gonna crank the mids up a bit as well, and we'll see how this sounds like. Which is already better, but we can push this even further. I'm going to add a second boost. On the preamp tab, on the input boost, we can set a different boost to get a different flavor as well from the amp, or more saturation, as it were. And one I really like is the FAS boost. So this is without this extra boost on, and it's going to be quite a boost at 12 dB. So I'll play 2 riffs, and then we'll see how that responds. So these are sort of starting points for you to look at. There's a lot of stuff that you can tweak to preference and how you want to set up for your guitar, but I thought I'd show some of the tricks I'm using for the actual preset itself, which we'll look at just afterwards, where I've really dialed in to my playing and also the guitar. So for this next thing I'm going to show, it's going to be adding noise. That's how I call the scene. And the reason behind it is to add this sort of really crazy kind of sounds that you can use different parts of the set, either in between songs or at the end of a song or in the middle of a song, to add a sense of tension before going to a much heavier part or to another part of the song. And it's a lot of fun when you've set it up. But I would recommend setting this to a separate scene that you can call up whenever you want, and then you can easily switch back to your bass tone, and so it immediately cuts off afterwards. So for this, we're going to be using a ring modulator. So I'll add that here. And then we're also adding a delay in front of the amp. So let's say delay 1 here. I'm using a delay after the amp as well. So we're using 2 delays. We'll add a second delay here. I'll leave them in series for now, especially the one after the amp. I like to use parallel delays after the amp, but we'll look at that in the final preset per se. So for our noise scene, I forgot one block, and that's an extra drive block that we'll put here as well. And for the drive block, we'll be using a fuzz. It's the face fuzz. And it's basically to make things sound more disgusting and noisy once it's activated. So here we have the delay going on after the amp and the gate. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to also activate a delay in front of the amp to add even more sort of noise, I guess. And we'll also be disabling the gate, so we really get things to ring out. I'm not disabling it just yet because it's really noisy. And the real fun is actually in the ring modulator. So a ring modulator in itself, I'll just enable it here. I'll turn off a few things. When you load it with the stock settings, you'll hear an extra tone with it. Sort of like connecting to the internet some 25 years ago. Sort of like a modem, things like that. But it's a set frequency. So what I do to make things move and sound really noisy is I add an envelope follower to the frequency and the frequency multiplier. And I'll show you why that makes things really crazy, because at its static settings, I'll play an open chord. It will sound a certain way, and once you start moving the frequency and frequency multiplier, you get all these crazy sounds that come out of it. So you can use an expression pedal to mess around with this, but as I don't have the space on the board, and I prefer to have something that I can just turn on and then mess around with the volume of the guitar, we're going to be using the envelope follower. So we'll attach an envelope follower to the frequency, so we'll right click onto that and add an envelope follower. And without changing any of these settings, this is what it does to the ring modulator. Which is already quite a bit of fun. And we can leave the parameter range as is. I'd maybe just pull down the attack and release to 0. And the real crazies begin when we also attach it to the frequency multiplier. So I'll do the same thing on the frequency multiplier. We'll add an envelope follower. We'll put attack and release onto 0. And we'll try it with the parameter range as is, and this is what that sounds like. So it's responding to the actual volume of the guitar going in. So well, I guess the harder you play, the higher up it will be in the range of the actual parameter of the knob. So if I play higher up, you get this really wild kind of laser sounds. I think Periphery use this kind of stuff on their latest record, which is really, really cool. And this is a way of getting those kind of sounds with less control, obviously, but you can set it to just one scene, and with just one controller, you have this automatic sort of crazy sound. You can also activate the pitch tracking so it follows the pitch of the notes you're playing a bit better, and then you get this really cool kind of drone. So by itself, that's pretty cool, but we can make it even more aggressive by adding the fuzz afterwards, and then also adding a delay before the amp, so things get really noisy, and then the delay after the amp. I'll use some basic delay settings just to illustrate, and then we'll see how that comes across. So this is with the ring mod and all the other stuff going on. I'll turn off the gate so it's really noisy. And something really cool to add to that is to add controller foot switch. You can use one on your FM3, or if you have an external foot switch to control it. To on the delay in front of the amp, sorry, is to have a switch control this and set it to hold on certain notes. So I'll give an example here just by clicking on it. So that's, I guess, two of the main kind of tricks and a bit of fun. I thought instead of doing a separate video, I'd demonstrate it within the patch and how I use it myself. So now we'll look at the final preset with everything dialed in how I would. And I'll show one more trick that I use live as well. And we'll take it from there. So this is the finished, I would say, dialed in preset, and it's basically the same one. I mean, it is the same one that I use live, minus my custom IR blend that I use. And you're getting exactly the same preset that I use to play out live and practice with the band as well, with all the little tricks that I showed before, and then some of the core tones that we use with the band. So something I forgot to mention, so I'm filming this after the fact, is in the cab block, I've messed around a bit with the preamp page. So in here, you can basically add a mic preamp on top of what you're running. So to emulate the microphone and it going into, say, a preamp that was typically used in a studio. I've used tape in this instance, but there's some other really good ones on there. You can try those out to see which suits you best in terms of tone. I find modern works quite well as well. I've set it to economy because when you set it to high quality, you'll see it's quite a substantial CPU hit, so I'll leave that on economy. You can mess around with the drive as well, which will add a bit more of the character of the preamp type. I like to keep that as 0 because I like a bit of the vibe, but not too much sort of extra, either saturation or stuff going on, at least for my ears. And the really cool part is the tone stack here that you can play around with. So sometimes you can add a different flavor without messing too much with the actual tone of the amp, if that makes sense. So if you like the way the amp responds and reacts, and the tone is pretty much there, but you want a tiny bit of tweaking for like the general sound without being too specific, i.e. changing, say, the mids on the amp and things like that, play around with the tone stack within the preamp page of the cab block. I will note, for that to be active, you have to select a preamp. So if you have none, which is the default, this won't actually have effect. So you select a preamp type and then you can play around the tone. I found these settings work quite nicely for what I like to hear, but you can dial these to taste, of course. I don't have an expression pedal on the board, but I have an extra external switch, and I've set it up to be momentary, and I'm using a controller on the control of the wah, so that will give me a sweep of the wah on a single button. I'll do a separate video on this topic because I feel that you can use this sort of concept and apply it to a lot of different things. But basically, I'm setting a single momentary switch on the board to sweep up with the wah. And the cool thing is I can set how long it will take to sweep up and also release. So what I've done here is that when I'm pushing down the actual pedal, and I'll show it as well, it's going to take around 2 seconds to go up to around 7 on the wah sweep, if that makes sense. And then it'll take 0.4 of a second to release. However, when I'm releasing the switch itself, it will automatically go to bypass. I find having the wah on a single switch, just for certain parts, adds a really nice sort of transition, and it's not something that I need an extra expression pedal on the board for, and I don't have the space as well, so it's a cool tip to be able to get those sort of sounds without having to add an external expression pedal somewhere else or on top of the board. We don't have many parts in the set and what we play where I need a clean tone, but we have, I think, two or three tracks maybe, where there's a short section where there's clean, at least two where I really use this scene, which is quite useful. As we're on the FM3, I've set it up so that it's a gapless change, if that makes sense. So as you can see on the amp, I've got some controllers set up on the gain, the overdrive, and the master volume. And so what I'm doing is that on the cleanish scene, we'll put it that way, I'm changing these settings and making it so that the amp is relatively clean. And what I'm also doing is I'm turning off the boosts that we had engaged. So as we're double boosting into the amp, there's a lot of signal going in. But when we take off those boosts and then pull back on the gain, the overdrive, and the master volume, we get this kind of cleanish tone. And I've added some delay for extra kind of ambience. And as I have two delays, I can then have both activated and we get this kind of almost dotted eighth quarter note kind of vibe, which is a bit longer. So I think I'm using like a dotted quarter note and a quarter note after the amp. And there's one more scene on here that I'll quickly talk about, and it's something I've called, it's like a faux chorus. Because with my custom IR, I'm around, it's like 74% on the CPU, and adding an actual chorus block would sort of take things over the edge. As we're using standard cabs, I have a bit more headroom, so I could change this if I wanted to. But instead, what I've done is I've set up a delay block to sound like a chorus. I think that pedal show went over this as well, and you can do this with other delay pedals or delay sounds, and it's a fun way or a good way of saving CPU if you can't add a chorus block. So to set up a delay block as sort of like a fake chorus, I like the 2290 with modulation, and you set the time as low as it can go, around like, I guess between 10 to maybe 30 ms. I've settled on 15. You put the feedback pretty low because you just want an extra signal that's coming across. You don't want the feedback to be too long. So you basically want to be doubling the signal where there's a slight modulation, and that's what's going to give you this kind of chorus vibe. Set the mix to 15%, and this is the faux chorus sound. So I just use that in one part of one song, and instead of having a separate preset for a different song, I made this into sort of like a kitchen sink preset. So I have everything on one preset, and the only thing I change on the board itself, I'll show a picture of that as well, is I change the BPM per song. So using my MC8, I'm setting the BPM for the different songs that we're playing, and all the delays are set up to be on a tempo, say quarter note or things like that. And in doing that, I just have the one preset that I use. I don't have to worry about changing the preset. However, I do have to do some tap dancing on the floor itself during the set to get the different sounds on. So thanks a lot for watching. There was a lot of talking, but there's a lot of tricks and there's a lot of stuff going on in this preset. And hopefully you can use some of that in your own tones or things that you experiment with. And I hope you enjoy this preset. As I said, this is the same thing that I use live, minus the custom IR. So if you want to get the same preset or the same thing that I'm using live, it's using Otto audio cabs, which I feel really work well with this setup, and they give me this, I guess, extra kind of vibe or even saturation or sound that I wasn't really able to find at least in the hour or so that I spent going through different cab combinations, because it's a custom blend of two cabs and speakers that really make this kind of, I guess, magic. So you can check that out below. So thanks a lot for watching. If you like this kind of content, please drop a like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks a lot.